I have the honor today to introduce our guest speaker, but before I do that, on behalf of the Cottonwood School District and all the community members of Cottonwood, we'd like to say special thanks to all of our servicemen and all of our veterans for your patriotism, your sacrifice, and most of all, your courage to our country. So thank you again on behalf of the Cottonwood School District and the community of Cottonwood to all of our veterans. Thank you. Again, I have the luxury to introduce our guest speaker. She's a 2008 graduate of Prairie High School. Upon completing her high school graduation, she moved to Spokane. She married the love of her life. They've been married for 4 years now, and they have a beautiful 2-year-old daughter. One thing I would like to say about this gal is when she sat in my classroom, one thing that she always said, and that kind of resonated in my mind, was she always said, "Shine on." And after reading the story, and after you hear the story, I think you'll see why that saying, "Shine on," always stood forward in her life. Would you please help me give a round of applause and a warm welcome to Jaleesa Bright Hammond.
All right, you guys are gonna have to bear with me. This story is a little rough for me, so I'm getting teared up, and my 2-year-old wants to join me. So let's try to get through this. I'd like to first introduce myself. My name is Jaleesa Hammond. I'm a graduate of Prairie High School, class of 2008. It's so nice to be back in Cottonwood and back to the school that I enjoyed more than anything. I'm not here to talk about myself. Instead, I came here to tell you a story about another Prairie graduate. My brother Randal is known around these halls as a funny, optimistic, sweet, gentle soul. My brother graduated in 2005 and moved to Lewiston to attend college. After a few years, Randal had a difficult time paying for school and ended up moving back to Cottonwood. In the meantime, my now husband and myself moved into our own apartment, and Randal moved in with us. Come on, Bailey. Randal had bigger plans in Cottonwood. He knew that he had a purpose here in life, and he knew that serving in the military would benefit not only himself, but our family. The moment my brother told me he was enlisting into the military, my heart skipped a beat. When he told me he was going into the Marine Corps, I was devastated. When he informed me that he was be going in the infantry division of the Marine Corps, thinking of my brother being on the front lines terrified me. The war was getting bigger, the death toll was getting higher, and injuries were plastered on the headlines. But after talking to my brother, I saw the determination and devotion in his eyes. Those next few months, I tried not to think about it and put it in the back of my head. October of 2008 came too fast. I gathered family and friends in my living room and awaited my brother's ride from his recruiter. I'll never forget how quiet my brother was. He sat in a chair and didn't say a word to anyone. He was completely silent. Then we heard a horn. I looked outside and saw my brother's world change instantaneously. We packed up his bags and headed downstairs. I hugged and kissed my brother goodbye and cried like I'd never cried before as I waved him off to boot camp. Randal excelled in boot camp. He wrote me letters daily and it was always exciting and sad to read his words on those pieces of paper. Most of them talked about how much he missed home, how much he missed our drives, talks, and dinners together. He always reminded me to never take for granted the beauty of Cottonwood, Idaho. The next few months came fast, and soon enough I was able to see my new and improved brother. He was stronger than before. He held his head higher with great confidence, but above all was still the big brother I knew and loved, that hugged just the same as when you left. I loved seeing him for the first time since boot camp. It was the most amazing feeling, but saying goodbye again was even harder than before. In December of 2009, my brother was back home and visiting friends in Moscow. I packed up my things and headed to see him as soon as I got the phone call. When I arrived, my brother dropped the news that he could be sent overseas as early as a few weeks. I didn't know what to think. I tried to blow it off and act as if he didn't say it. I knew the day would be coming, but I could have never prepared myself for the moment I said goodbye and the heartache of not knowing if I would ever see my brother again. May 10th, 2010, my life changed forever. My brother had been in Afghanistan for under 3 months when I received multiple phone calls from my mom and my husband. After the 4th missed call from my mom, I excused myself from my office at work and called her back. She didn't answer. I called again. I couldn't understand her. Her voice was filled with sorrow, and the only word I captured through her sobbing was Randal. I hung up and called my husband. He too was in tears, but was easier to understand. He said, "I need to talk to you about your brother." Out of reaction, I dropped my phone to the ground and went into pure panic mode. I went back into my office, grabbed my things, and left for the day. As I headed downstairs, I saw my husband outside. His eyes were puffy and his skin was pale. I instantly thought to myself, I'll never see my big brother again. He's gone. My husband hugged me and apprehensively told me, Lisa, there's been an accident with Randall. We don't know much, but we do know that he's lost both of his legs. I'm sorry. I dropped to the ground and bawled for what seemed like forever. Is he alive? How much of his legs were lost? Does he have brain damage? Where is he? These are all questions that crossed my mind and parts of sentences that hit my mouth. Nobody knew anything. I called my mom and she was still beyond the point of understanding. I had to take a step back and try to answer my own questions. Minutes turned into hours and hours felt like years when I awaited some sort of answer. My mom was 10 hours away from me, my sister was 4 hours away, and my brother's condition was unknown. I instantly started packing my bags in hopes to catch a flight to see my mom, and that I did. I stayed multiple days in Boise with my mother, awaiting phone calls from the military to update us on Randall's condition. He was brought to Germany where he was stabilized. Every nurse told us something different about his injuries. I couldn't wrap my mind around my brother being so defenseless, vulnerable, and alone. We waited for the next phone call to let us know when we could fly to Maryland to see my brother. The day finally arrived when my mother and I could leave the West Coast and travel to Maryland to see Randall. The flight seemed like it took 10 years, but I could have never prepared myself for our arrival in Bethesda. When we got off the plane, we looked for the military personnel who were planning on meeting us at the airport. I looked around and saw another family who looked lost as well. As time passed, I started realizing they were in Bethesda to see their loved one as well. We all loaded into the van, where we were completely silent for almost an hour. I wanted to scream, drive faster, but couldn't bring myself to do anything except hold my mom's hand. As we arrived up to the hospital, the sergeant told the group that he would be separating us and taking Randall's family up to the ICU first. My heart raced as we approached his room. And then I saw his face for the first time in what seemed like forever. He was completely covered up, sweat dripping off his face. He looked in shock to see us and broke down in tears as we ran to his bedside. I was so happy to see my brother alive. I couldn't believe he had made it all the way back to the United States. As he hugged my mom, I'll never forget his first sentence to her. I love you so much, Mom, and I'm so sorry. I wasn't in shock that my brother was apologizing for something that was out of his control. He was always worrying about others placing their needs above his own and caring so much for people he loved. He kept telling us, I don't have legs. I lost my legs, Mom and Julie said. He would tell us as if we didn't know. By the way he said this, I could tell. By the way he said this and the way he kept himself covered up, I could tell humiliation and discomfort were understatements of Randall's emotions in the moments of seeing us. It took Randall almost a week to show me his injuries, and when he did, it was by complete accident. The nurse came in to change his bandages and was not aware that Randall usually made us turn around and face the wall while they changed them. My brother was losing a lot of blood, and his condition was getting worse. He was incoherent most of the time and fighting infections, and his body didn't want to seem to hold on, but it did. But Randall's always been a fighter, and his heart wouldn't let him give up. With time, Randall began to piece together what had happened to him. The stories he told in the hospital were very vague, and he couldn't remember much. Nowadays, he remembers everything. Randall remembers the morning he put on his boots and headed to the field. My brother stepped on an IED made by the Taliban, resulting in loss of both of his legs and leaving his arms and hands in shambles. Eventually, Randall lost his left hand as well. Randall didn't understand as much as I thought he did when we arrived at the hospital. I remember the moment Randall realized he didn't have fingers on his left hand. The nurse arrived with my brother's food for the day. He struggled to figure out how to eat. He couldn't lift his fork and he was shaking in distress. I had such a hard time watching my big brother, the one who had taught me so much as a kid, struggling with such basic tasks as eating. My brother broke down crying when trying to eat his meal that morning. Up until a week ago, I thought he was crying out of frustration, but I was informed that I had witnessed the first moments of realizing that he had lost more body parts than he originally thought. I'm not here to focus on the horrific things that happened to my brother that day, but to focus on what was lost and given to the rest of us as citizens. As I walked the hallways of the hospital in Bethesda, Maryland, I saw families lose their only child, 18-year-old boys coming in with injuries we've only seen in movies. And I also witnessed the most beautiful and warm reunion. I sat in my brother's room when a gentleman trembled his way through Randall's doorway. I had never seen this guy before, but I could tell by the indescribable look on Randall's face that he did not only know this man, but he loved this man. This was his brother. This was the man Randall pushed out of the way the moment the IED exploded. This was the man Randall had saved. The bond these men and women have with each other is unbelievable. These people barely know each other, but will risk their own lives to save one another. It's something I'll never understand, but it's something I will forever admire. I've seen many people throughout my life who are veterans, men and women, walk through stores wearing a hat, a jacket, a shirt, or drive away in a vehicle that says vet. That term vet does not do them justice. My brother has given up his whole life for this country, for every single one of you. He doesn't know you, but yet he lost his legs in the end to make sure that you are able to live a free and happy life. The men and women alongside me who are vets have done the same thing. The other men and women who are not able to be here fought for the same reason. Every vet has a story. Do not be so cruel to judge or take for granted the sacrifice each and every one of them has done for you individually. I took a trip to the grocery store with Randal once and it was unforgettable. As he walked up and down the aisles, everyone stared. Everyone turned around to make sure that they got a second look at the man with no legs. I saw the anguish upon my brother's face with every passing person. I have witnessed people stare and talk under their breath as they walk by him. I want to bring closure to that being the norm when passing somebody in my brother's condition. Next time you find yourself encountering a situation like the one I had mentioned, don't hesitate to walk up to the man in the chair and shake his hand. Say thank you, and whatever you would say under your breath, say to him. Kids, don't be afraid to say hello and say thank you. It's hurtful to whisper about people and talk about them like they cannot hear you. Use your words speaking from your mouth, not with your eyes. I want to personally thank every person who has fought for our country, the ones who are now at rest, the ones near, the ones far, and the ones who are hidden in the shadows that you do not know about. Every single one of them is my hero, and I cannot thank them enough for giving a part of their lives to better my own. As for my brother Randal, he's my biggest idol. He always has been. He doesn't like to be called a hero, but Randal, you truly are my hero. I've tried to sit on my legs all day to imagine what it's like to not have them. I've tried to zip up my pants with only one hand to see what he goes through on a daily basis. Tried to understand the pain he's going through with his injuries and the memories of what he went through and what he saw over in Afghanistan, but I cannot. The only thing I can do is love him and thank him. I'll hug him like every hug could be our last, and I will thank him to complete annoyance. Randal, you're my superhero. You're the reason I push through the toughest times in life. I thank you for your service and thank you for being my brother. I love you.